He thought humiliating her in court would be the end of her story. He had no idea it was about to end his career. The story begins with a sound no courthouse should ever hear. The crack of a body hitting cold marble. Jada Thompson is slammed face first into the corridor wall by Officer Derek Collins, a man with 19 years of unchecked authority weighing down his badge. Pain shoots through her shoulder as metal cuffs bite into her wrists, but she doesn't scream. She doesn't beg. She watches. She notes the time on the wall clock. The people who suddenly find the floor fascinating. The phone still recording where it fell. Because Jada Thompson didn't walk into this courthouse by mistake. And in less than an hour, the man who humiliated her will realize he just arrested the wrong woman, inside the wrong courtroom. The Toyota Camry's engine ticked softly as Jada Thompson turned the key at 7:15 a.m., silencing it in a space marked, public parking, rather than the reserved judicial lot where her name had been freshly stenciled the day before. Through the windshield, the Clayton County Courthouse rose against the morning sky, all marble columns and bronze doors, the words, "Equal Justice Under Law," carved deep into the stone lintel. She'd argued cases in this building for 12 years, always in her armor of tailored suits and leather briefcases. Today, she wore jeans and a simple cream blouse, her natural hair twisted into a crown that felt like both heritage and defiance. Her fingers brushed the leather folder on the passenger seat containing her judicial appointment letter, the official credentials that would transform her from advocate to adjudicator. She left it there, along with the embossed business cards reading, "The Honorable Jada Thompson." Instead, she slipped only her bar card and driver's license into her back pocket, feeling their thin edges press against her hip as she locked the car. The morning air carried the scent of magnolias and exhaust. Jada approached the public entrance and immediately registered what she'd suspected would be there, two parallel realities operating within feet of each other. At the left checkpoint, white professionals in business attire moved through security with easy smiles and casual conversation, their briefcases waved through without a second glance. At the right checkpoint, people of color faced rigid postures, sharp questions, bag searches that lingered too long. Jada chose the right line. The young black security guard at the metal detector glanced up, and something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or warning. She stepped forward, already cataloging details her legal mind would need later, already knowing that this deliberate choice would reveal the courthouse's true face. The metal detector's beep seemed louder on this side of the entrance. Security Officer Marcus Webb, his nameplate red, shifted uncomfortably as he flagged Jada for additional screening, his youth evident in the way his hand hesitated over his radio. She watched his internal struggle, the weight of protocols he clearly didn't believe in pressing against whatever instinct told him this woman didn't belong in the problem category. Then the air changed. Heavy footsteps approached with the confidence of ownership, and Jada looked up at Officer Derek Collins. He was a towering presence, 6'3" with the build of someone who'd spent decades reminding people of his physical dominance. 19 years on the courthouse force, she knew from the personnel files, and 11 complaints buried in sealed records. His swagger suggested he owned every marble tile beneath his boots. Business? Collins's voice carried an edge reserved for interrogation, not inquiry. The single word managed to be both question and accusation, stripped of the courtesy afforded to citizens in their own public building. Jada met his gaze with practiced calm. "I have business with the court." Something passed between Collins and the woman watching from the information desk, Sharon Vickers, the court administrator whose signature appeared on every administratively resolved complaint. It was a look Jada recognized from a dozen courtroom exchanges, a silent communication that said volumes. Another one. Another person who doesn't belong here. Another situation to manage. Collins stepped closer, invading the space that should have remained between officer and citizen. What kind of business? Jada noticed Marcus Webb backing away slightly, removing himself from whatever was about to unfold. She noticed the way other officers at the checkpoint had subtly turned their attention elsewhere. She noticed the security camera's angle, and filed that information away. Personal business, she replied evenly. Am I required to disclose that to enter a public building? Collins's jaw tightened. The game had begun. The directions Collins provided sent Jada to the second floor, away from the judicial chambers on the fourth floor where her nameplate was being installed at that very moment. She found herself in the family court waiting area, surrounded by parents in custody disputes, their faces tight with the anxiety of potentially losing their children. When she attempted to access the judicial elevators at the corridor's end, Collins materialized again as if he'd been tracking her movements. "Those elevators aren't for you." His body blocked the polished brass doors, arms crossed over his chest. Jada kept her voice level, professional. "I'm accessing the fourth floor. These elevators service all floors, and I'm a member of the bar with legitimate court business." Court clerk Bethany Morrison stood 15 feet away, witnessing the exchange. Instead of intervening, she leaned toward a colleague and whispered, her phone rising to capture the moment. The modern courthouse spectacle, documentation not for justice, but for entertainment. "Use the public stairs," Collins ordered, his hand moving to his radio. "Or leave the building. Under what authority are you restricting my access to public areas of this courthouse?" Jada's attorney instincts engaged fully now, each word chosen for the legal record she knew was building. Collins's thumb pressed the radio button. "Security to third floor corridor. I have an uncooperative individual, possibly disturbed, refusing to follow directions. Requesting backup." The word "disturbed" hung in the air like an accusation. Jada recognized the tactic, the language carefully chosen to paint her as irrational, potentially dangerous. She reached slowly for her phone, making sure her movements were visible and unthreatening. "I'm documenting this interaction," she stated clearly. "I'm a member of the Georgia Bar, and I'm being denied access to." "Put the phone away." Collins's voice dropped to something darker. "Now." 2 more officers emerged from the stairwell, responding to the backup call. The corridor suddenly felt much smaller, the air thick with the potential for violence that Jada had witnessed too many times in her career, always against people who looked like her, always justified later in reports that bore no resemblance to the truth. The confrontation shifted to the third-floor corridor, that grand marble and mahogany hallway designed to inspire reverence for the law. Portrait after portrait lined the walls, previous judges staring down with stern expressions, their faces overwhelmingly white and male until the final 3 frames, where diversity had finally, reluctantly been allowed a small foothold. Jada stood beneath them now, facing Collins in a hallway that seemed to ask, "Do you really belong here? Leave immediately." Collins's patience, already thin, had evaporated completely. "This is your final warning." Jada held her phone at chest level, camera active. "Under what statute or regulation are you removing me from a public building? I have broken no law, violated no rule, and..." Collins exploded. The violence was sudden and practiced, the motion of someone who'd done this before and never faced consequences. His hand shot out, seizing her arm with enough force to leave immediate bruises. He spun her toward the wall, and Jada felt the world tilt as her feet left the ground for a split second before her face connected with cold marble. The impact split her lip. Copper taste flooded her mouth. Her phone clattered across the polished floor, skittering to a stop 6 feet away, still recording, its red light blinking steadily. Collins wrenched her arm behind her back, the angle wrong, the pain shooting up to her shoulder. His knee pressed into her spine, pinning her against the wall beneath the portraits of her new colleagues. Metal handcuffs bit into her wrists with that distinctive clicking sound that echoed through the corridor. "You just assaulted an officer," he hissed, his breath hot against her ear. His voice carried the satisfaction of someone who believed the narrative he was constructing. "You're going to learn today what happens when people like you don't know their place in my courthouse." Jada's legal mind worked through the pain. Witnesses. Camera angles. His exact words. The physical evidence of her split lip and the handcuffs too tight. Everything was being recorded, by her phone, by the courthouse cameras, by the universe's inexorable documentation of injustice that believed itself justified. Blood dripped from Jada's lip onto the marble floor, each drop a small red testament spreading slowly across the polished stone. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard footsteps, several pairs approaching, then stopping, then moving on. A probation officer glanced at the scene, his eyes widening momentarily before he found something fascinating about his shoes and hurried past. 2 attorneys in expensive suits registered the handcuffed woman, the aggressive officer, and made the same calculation: not my problem, not my fight, not my career to risk. A court reporter actually reached for her phone as if to help, but Collins's sharp glare sent her scurrying toward the stairwell. This was the courthouse's open secret, the truth everyone knew but nobody spoke. Collins and his aggressive security measures had been the subject of hushed warnings for years, warnings shared among public defenders, among minority attorneys, among anyone who might need to warn their clients: don't challenge Collins, don't look at him wrong, don't give him a reason. What's all this commotion? Sharon Vickers arrived with the affected concern of someone who perfected the art of looking helpful while doing nothing. She took in Jada's bleeding face, the too tight handcuffs, Collins's aggressive stance. "Ma'am, are you on any medications? You need to calm down before this situation gets worse." The implication was clear: this was Jada's fault, Jada's instability, Jada's responsibility to de-escalate the violence being done to her. Backup Officer Miguel Reyes arrived next, and Jada saw something different in his eyes: recognition that this had gone too far, that the woman handcuffed against the wall posed no threat that justified this response. His hand moved toward Collins as if to intervene, but then fell back to his side. The code was stronger than conscience. He wouldn't break ranks. Jada tasted blood and copper and rage, but she kept her voice clear and steady, speaking for the phone still recording 6 feet away. "My name is Jada Thompson. I am being assaulted without cause. Officer Collins just threatened me for asserting my rights as a citizen in a public courthouse. This is being documented." Collins tightened his grip. "Resisting arrest, threatening an officer. I'm not resisting anything." Each word came out measured, deliberate. "I'm documenting civil rights violations." The elevator chimed at the corridor's end, its polished brass doors sliding open with mechanical precision. Judge Elizabeth Grant emerged first, followed by a delegation of 5 judges and court officials, all dressed in the formal attire reserved for ceremonial occasions. They'd been waiting in the judicial conference room since 7:30, increasingly concerned about their newest colleague's absence. Grant had finally decided to search for Jada herself, worried that perhaps she'd gotten lost in the courthouse's labyrinthine hallways on her first day. The scene that greeted them was a tableau of brutality in the Temple of Justice. Jada Thompson, their new colleague, the woman whose appointment they'd celebrated just last week, handcuffed and bleeding, her face pressed against marble, her lips split and swelling. Officer Collins still gripped her arm, his knee still pressed into her spine. Sharon Vickers stood nearby wearing an expression of bureaucratic concern. The phone on the floor recorded everything, its red light blinking like an accusation. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The freeze was cinematic, Collins's face transforming from aggressive certainty to confusion to the first creeping edge of horror as he recognized Judge Grant. His hands remained locked on Jada's arm, but his grip loosened infinitesimally, his mind clearly racing to understand why the chief judge was here, why she was staring at him with an expression that could crack granite. Grant's voice, when it came, could have flash-frozen water. "Officer Collins." Each syllable carried 3 decades of judicial authority, of battles fought and won, of tolerance exhausted. "Remove those handcuffs immediately." Collins's hands fumbled for his keys, suddenly clumsy. "Judge Grant, this woman was." "Remove them. Now." The handcuffs clicked open. Jada's arms fell to her sides, circulation returning in pins and needles. She remained facing the wall, giving Collins time to fully comprehend what came next. Grant stepped forward, her heels clicking sharp against marble. "You have just committed felony assault and battery against Judge Jada Thompson, who as of 8 o'clock this morning became not only your colleague but the court's appointed overseer of all security personnel matters. Collins's face drained of all color. Behind him, Sharon Vickers went rigid. The other officers took an involuntary step backward. The word "judge" hung in the air like a detonation, reshaping everything, recontextualizing every moment of the past hour. Judge Grant's chambers smelled of old leather and lemon oil, a sanctuary of dark wood and law books that rose floor to ceiling. Jada sat in a wingback chair while a paramedic cleaned her split lip and checked her pupils for concussion. The swelling had already begun, her mouth tender where it had connected with marble. Through the window, the morning sun illuminated the words carved into the courthouse facade, "Equal justice under law." The irony was almost too perfect. Grant dismissed the paramedic and closed the door, the heavy oak sealing them into a conversation that would determine the trajectory of everything that followed. She was 72, her silver hair cut short, her eyes sharp with the kind of intelligence that came from watching patterns repeat for decades. "The sealed files you were sent," Grant began without preamble, settling behind her desk. "They were the appetizer, not the meal. The State Judicial Council has been trying to address this courthouse's security culture for 6 years. 43 documented incidents of excessive force, racial profiling, and civil rights violations. All resolved internally, which means buried." Jada pressed the ice pack to her lip. "How many involved Collins?" 11. "He's the tip of a very deep iceberg." Grant slid a file across the desk. "Your appointment came with a special mandate. You're not just here to hear cases. You're here to clean house." Jada opened the file. Complaint after complaint, each one telling the same story in different words: humiliation at security checkpoints, aggressive searches without cause, threats, intimidation. Names and dates documenting a system that had learned to protect its predators. "I can make this easier for you," Grant said carefully. "Collins can be reassigned to desk duty pending an internal investigation. No public spectacle, no media circus. You can start your judicial career without being defined by this incident." She paused, letting that future hang in the air like a lifeline. "Or we can do this the other way. But Jada, if you go public, they will come for you with everything they have." Jada looked at her reflection in the window, at her split lip and the bruises already darkening on her wrists. She thought of the probation officer who'd walked past her. The attorneys who'd averted their eyes. The court reporter who'd been too afraid to help. "How many people without judicial credentials has Collins done this to?" she asked quietly. "We don't know. Most never file complaints." Jada stood, still holding the ice pack. "Then we're doing this publicly, by the book, and we're burning the whole corrupt system down." The counterattack came with military precision. 48 hours after Jada filed formal charges against Collins, the police union held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Union President Carl Hendricks, flanked by a dozen officers in full uniform, painted a picture of a dedicated public servant ambushed by an activist judge with an agenda. Officer Collins responded appropriately to an uncooperative individual who refused to follow security protocols, Hendricks declared, his voice carrying righteous indignation. "This is a witch hunt designed to undermine law enforcement credibility." Anonymous sources, later traced to the union's communications director, leaked cherry-picked details from Jada's decade of civil rights cases to friendly media outlets. Headlines appeared painting her as radically anti-police, conveniently omitting that she'd won those cases because the evidence of misconduct was overwhelming. Sharon Vickers filed a formal complaint with the Judicial Conduct Commission alleging that Jada had deliberately manufactured a confrontation by refusing to properly identify herself, creating a security incident that endangered courthouse staff. But the most disturbing attack came on the third day. Jada discovered that someone with access to sealed juvenile records had obtained her file from 30 years ago, a shoplifting arrest when she was 16, a stupid teenage mistake that resulted in community service and expungement. The local news ran it under the headline, "New Judge's Criminal Past Raises Questions." The article somehow failed to mention the expungement, the exemplary record since, the full scholarship to law school, the career of fighting for justice. Her car was keyed in the courthouse parking lot, deep gouges spelling out, "Race Traitor," across the driver's side door. The threatening calls started on her cell phone, heavy breathing, muffled voices telling her to back off or else, one particularly chilling message describing exactly what she'd worn that morning down to the color of her nail polish. Someone was watching. Someone wanted her to know she was being watched. The message was crystalline in its clarity: back down or be destroyed. Retreat or watch everything she'd built crumble. They had the machinery, the institutional power, the willingness to wage total war. The question was whether Jada had the strength to withstand it. Jada stood on the courthouse steps, the morning sun illuminating the words carved above her, "Equal justice under law." Behind her, those words had become a promise she intended to keep. Before her, 40 reporters held microphones and cameras, the crowd spilling down the steps and into the plaza. She wore her judicial robes for the first time, not in a courtroom, but here, in this public declaration of what justice demanded. "I was assaulted in this building not despite being a judge, but because Officer Collins didn't know I was one." Her voice carried across the plaza, steady and clear. "Which means every day, citizens who look like me, who don't have my credentials, face this same brutality in the place meant to protect their rights." She released the complete video. 3 minutes and 42 seconds of Collins's escalating aggression, the violent slam against marble, his hissed threat about teaching her her place. The footage went viral within hours, shared millions of times, each view a witness to injustice documented in high definition. The FBI investigation that followed was swift and devastating. Agents uncovered systematic civil rights violations, evidence suppression, witness intimidation. Text messages between Collins and other officers revealed a culture of contempt toward minority visitors, with ratings given for aggressive deportations and jokes about making people remember their place. Collins was arrested and charged with felony assault, deprivation of rights under color of law, and conspiracy. 6 other officers were suspended. Sharon Vickers resigned rather than face disciplinary hearings that would expose her role in burying complaints. But Jada's most important work came next. She convened the first public hearing on courthouse security, held in the largest courtroom with cameras broadcasting live. For 6 hours, citizens testified, dozens of them, their stories creating an undeniable record of humiliation and brutality. A single mother searched so aggressively she missed her custody hearing. A defense attorney threatened with arrest for defending his client's rights. A grandmother with a pacemaker forced to endure repeated metal detector trips while officers laughed. Jada's first official ruling as a judge established a civilian oversight board for all courthouse security, with mandatory body cameras, de-escalation training, and zero tolerance for racial profiling. In her closing statement, she returned to Collins's words, "Officer Collins told me I needed to learn my place. He was right. My place is on this bench, ensuring that every person who enters this courthouse, regardless of race, class, or credentials, receives the equal justice those words above our door promise." 6 months later, Jada sat on the bench hearing her first cases. Officer Marcus Webb, the young guard who'd flagged her that morning, now worked as a clerk in her chambers while attending law school at night. When she walked through the public entrance each morning, she was greeted not with suspicion but with respect, earned not through her title, but through her refusal to let injustice hide behind marble walls and bronze doors.